I think we should get it going. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Those who are, of course, present here, and also many of you who are on the online, both on Zoom and YouTube. This is again a very special program we have. Firstly, on behalf of Asset Colloquium, let me also welcome, apart from, of course, directors, welcomed you on behalf of TIFR, but it's also a pleasure to invite all of you to the Asset Colloquium Forum. And I do know that all of you either have been already part of TIFR in some way, or you have worked for TIFR, so you are never new people to us. So with that, let me briefly mention the flow of the program. So I'm going to take a few minutes, hopefully, to introduce all the distinguished panelists today. And then there will be, of course, I'll hand over the podium to Mortimer, and then there will be a brief presentations by all four of them, probably saying what currently they are doing and what kind of work that's happening. I think that should give a good feeling about their current activities. And then we'll, of course, going to have all four of them here, and they will get into a pleasant discussion. And at that time, we'll also take up questions from the audience, and hopefully we'll stitch everything together and make sure that we don't exceed too much. I do expect a little bit of spilling today because of multiple speakers. So with that, let me start today's proceedings. But before I even go ahead and formally introduce, I would like to once again thank our own Oindrila for conceptualizing the whole program and making sure that this happens. So we have four panelists. Mortimer Chatterjee is also going to be our moderator. So let me say a few words about him. He, along with his wife, Tara Lal, co-founded Chatterjee and Lal, as well as 47A, a design gallery. Based in Mumbai, the galleries are focused on contemporary and historical material. The founders also consult for major corporate collections, including the Taj Group of hotels. Chatterjee has authored and co-authored several publications, including a publication on the art collection of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR, along with curating the exhibition of that collection at the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai. I was speaking with him saying every Asset Colloquium speaker gets a book that was sort of produced by him as a co-author. He is an editor of an evolving series of publications on the disciplines across arts spectrum, the first of which was focused in the modern art, Indian art. That was about Mortimer, and now I'll go to Vrunda Pathare. I'm going in the alphabetical order of the last name. She's, of course, head of Godrej Archives, was instrumental in setting up the Godrej Archives and establishing archival processes as an integral part of the organizational activity at Godrej. She is currently the secretary of the steering committee of the section on business archives, which is SBA for short, of the International Council on Archives, which is ICA for short, and president of the Oral History Association of India. Vrunda is also a member of the steering committee for the Dr. Avobhai Wadia and Dr. Bomanji Khurshid J. Wadia Archives for Women, and of the Academic Council of the Maritime History Society, Mumbai. Vrunda has authored a monograph titled Arthur Bedford Orlebar, Founders and Guardians of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai, which was published in 2018 as a part of the Asiatic Society monograph series. Her essay titled Overview of the Business Archives in India was published recently in the third edition of the publication Business Archives in International Comparison, which was published by Section on Business Archives of International Council on Archives in 2021. With a postgraduate degree in history from the University of Mumbai and training in records management from the National Archives of India, she has contributed to the field through research, publications, and presentations at the national and international conferences. She started her career as a research assistant at the Sadashiv Goraskar, former director CSMES, which is our former Prince of Wales Museum, past president Commonwealth Association of Museums, on the following two projects. One is Raj Bhavans in Maharashtra, a book published in the year 2002, and the second one, ONGC Museum Project, which was during 2003 and 4. She also worked as an assistant archivist at the TIFR Archives of TIFR. So that's why I said all are connected with somewhere to TIFR. And we'll move on to our very own Oindrila. Of course, needs no introduction to this particular audience, but those of you who are on the online, let me say she's a graduate from University of Calcutta. She's associated with two leading archives of Mumbai, the archives of the TIFR as a consultant archivist, as well as the archives of CSMVS, which is formerly Prince of Wales Museum of Western India, as a consultant research facilitator. She's also looking after the TIFR art collection and regularly organizes artworks in TIFR, which are, I must tell you, very, very popular, where the art lovers of Mumbai can get a glimpse of the priceless collection that we possess at TIFR. And as I said, alphabetically, coming to the last one, Puja Vaish. She is a director at the Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation from 2022 now. The JNF functions as a modern and contemporary art wing of the Prince of Wales Museum, as it was known. Vice recent curated exhibitions include Out of Place, Journeys in Indian Art, Nasreen Mohammadai, The Vastness Again and Again, Jamin Homelands, S.H. Raja, and Ancestors by Sahej Rahel. Previously, she was a curator at the Dr. Bhav Daji Lad Museum in Pune, 2013 to 2019, where she also engaged with art and design collections of colonial India spanning from 1800s to early 1900s. She was a research writer for the recent publication on the museum's collection, which was edited by Tasneem Mehta. Exploring textile histories, she co-curated an exhibition with the museum's director with contemporary artists alongside the museum collection. So again, to just continue, as an art educator, Vice was lecturer at the Faculty of Fine Arts, Baroda, and Delhi College, that was 2008 and 9, Delhi College of Art, 2009 and 10, and the Kamala Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture from 2010 to 14, and managed the art and history and criticism course at the BDL Museum from 14 to 19. Puja Vaish received the gold medal and Nasreen Mohammadai Award at Faculty of Fine Arts, Baroda, where she completed her bachelor's and master's between 2019 to 2005 in painting, following which she actually worked as a practicing artist and held exhibitions of her works. So I hope I didn't misspell too much of the names and affiliations. I'm sorry about that. But with that, now let me invite Mortimer for taking the rest of the proceedings today. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the invitation to present to you today. This is the second time that our group has met in a public forum. The first was last month And we had one more member at that time, that was Uttara Parekh, who sadly couldn't make it today. She spoke to us about the Air India collection, which is another fabulous Mumbai-based art collection. What brings us all together is precisely the fact that in some way each of us has looked after, has been responsible for the archives of a particular collection, of a Mumbai-based collection. And I think that between us, we can see the resonances both within the remit of and the mandate of the jobs we've been tasked with, but then also in terms of the collections themselves and the periods in which they were built up over the, let's say, early to later part of the 20th century. There seems to be some kind of thread which brings these collections together in a very interesting manner, which talks not only to the art of the period, but also to the business practices of the period, and then speaks also to our present moment and the way in which we conceive of archives and the importance of archives, both to the institutions for which we have been working, but then also to audiences, and how the work we do feeds into some sense of a dialogue with audiences both locally in Bombay, but then also nationally and internationally. I think one extra thing I'd like to say at this point is what really makes these collections so important in the Indian context is precisely because of the absence of museums and museum collections in India. And it is for that reason that oftentimes it is collections such as those which we are lucky enough to be part of that become then the primary source of information regarding the art history of both Bombay, but more broadly of India during the 20th century. And it's by looking at collections such as those we'll be looking at today that we are given an insight into our own art history in a manner that perhaps museums should and perhaps have not been able to do for us. That's a slightly contentious topic. We might focus on that a little in our discussion afterwards. We're going to follow the same guiding logic that led us in our last discussion, and that is to talk about each of our collections in something of a chronological order. And also, so we'll start first with Vrunda talking about the Godrej Archives. Now, she, in a sense, is slightly adjacent, in a sense, to some of the other collections we'll be hearing about today, because it's not necessarily an art-focused collection, but what becomes critical and so resonant to the other collections is the way in which the archives can really bring out a particular story, in this case, a story of a business and a corporate. And as I said last time, I'll say it again, in a sense, the Godrej Archives are a gold standard for us to look at. So very important to learn from. Oindrila then, of course, will be talking about the collection of this institute, the TIFR. I'll briefly talk about the Taj art collection, as well as the Air India art collection. And we'll finally, Puja will give us an introduction to the JNAF, the Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation, as well as the work she's been doing, bringing in contemporary artists to respond to that collection, which brings in a new focus and talks perhaps to the future and to the way in which we can make archives and collections continue to be important. But first off, I'd love to invite Vrunda to speak to us about the Godrej Archives, as well as her exhibition making. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Oindrila, for inviting us. And thank you, Mortimer, for setting the tone right for this, because we are in a way connected, because TIFR itself is an example of combination of the visionary people, a politician, Pandit Nehru, a scientist, Dr. Bhabha, an industrialist, J.R.D. Tata. So I think, you cannot really think about history in really watertight compartments, because industries, sciences, businesses, or even politics and the society, they are really inseparable. So in a way, when we are talking about history or institutions, you have to think about everything contextually, because that would actually bring out the essence and the proper kind of a narrative out. It is really interesting because, as Professor Satyan has already mentioned, that I started my career as an archivist here at TIFR when Dr. Oindrila Raychaudhuri was setting it up. So actually, I really owe to this institution, because that was my training ground, and that's what actually gave me the confidence to set up the Godrej Archives. So here is to that, because this is the connection that even I found in Godrej Archives, and where you can actually see Naval Godrej and Sunuben Godrej at the inauguration of TIFR on 15 January 1962. And why they were here is because these are the aluminum fabrication that was done by Godrej. So all the louvers that you see here, even these kind of aluminum frames that you see, they were actually fabricated by Godrej, because they were into this business in 70s and 60s in aluminum fabrication. So we have these pictures in our collection when Mittar Bedi, who was the industrial photographer who was commissioned by Godrej to document everything that Godrej has done, and that was in 1972. So you don't see the really amoeba garden over here, if you can carefully see. And these are the pictures that we have in our collection. Because the work that Godrej had done in aluminum fabrication, we have this entire album where Air India, Express Towers, so this was the new kind of architecture that was coming up, and Godrej had a role to play in this. So that's why these interconnected histories are really very important. And interestingly, especially the post-independence era, means we are already like more than 75 years old independent nation. And there are so many institutes who have already completed their 50 years, 75 years, but unfortunately, these institutions haven't really have the archive. So we are really losing out a lot on contemporary histories. Means I have read in Ramchandra Guha's, book that, he says that, somehow our history stops at 15th August 1947. And, like not many historians are talking about, what happened after that. But my thing is like, it's not really the historians, but there are no records. So if as a contemporary historian, I am trying to search for the records, there are no records available. So when we were putting up even the ONGC museum, we had really a struggle to find out even, who has conceptualized it, where these documents were. So it is really a very difficult thing to write the contemporary history. And therefore, it is really essential for all these institutions to think about why these archives are needed. And of course, the reasons are like many, there is indifference on part of the institutions. Technology has also added to the difficulties of, keeping these records. Paper records have vanished. There are like organizational changes. Suddenly there are offices change, mergers happen, everything really gets lost. And then we are like, struggling to find out where this file is and, where these records are. And therefore, archiving is actually has to be seen as, process of recovering from that kind of a loss, discovering new things about our own past. And that's what we have been doing at Godrej Archives, which started in 2006. And what we have been doing is not just like trying to preserve the history of the Godrej, because it's already 126-year-old company, but we are trying to also manage the knowledge that is being created currently. So while we are actually talking about, So while we are talking about, survey of the old records is what we do, but we are also trying to do, document the present that is actually being, done at the currently at the businesses. So especially, what businesses are doing currently, if we are not really documenting and recording it now, there is no future history as well. So, 10 years afterwards, we will be struggling to even find out what we had done 10 years back. So that's why this is what we have taken upon ourselves, that it's not just the history that we will be preserving, but also what we are doing currently, which is going to be the future history, is also what we need to preserve. And we are also trying to create the resource in form of oral history, and TIFR, of course, has a really great collection of oral histories of scientists. So what we are doing is we are actually interviewing all the employees who have completed more than 25 years in the company, because they are the resource. In absence of records, they know what has really gone into doing certain projects, what kind of challenges that they might have faced once the decision is taken to manufacture certain products. The sales and marketing teams might have faced many challenges delivering it. So these are the things that only can come from the oral histories. And oral history is not just of the employees, but also everyone who is associated with the company. So there are dealers, there are distributors, there is whole chain of this, the supply chain that we are talking about, and also our customers who have been using the Godrej products. And of course, the institutions like TIFR were also one of the buyers then. And then, of course, our main task is, of course, cataloging, and then the storage is also very important, and then the care and conservation, and of course, the dissemination. But what we are actually doing is, therefore, chronicling the history of place, history of products, history of processes, and history of people. So place, when I'm talking about the place, it is, is there? Yeah. Can I just use this? Yeah. So this is actually, yeah, okay. Yeah. So this is actually Vikhroli in, again, 1970s. And now, of course, it is definitely one cannot recognize, because there is a lot more has happened. Even those mountains cannot be seen anymore. But therefore, even the places have changed over a period of time. So how actually through photographs, documents, one can really keep documenting how the places around us have changed, how our neighborhoods have changed. Even that is really very important when we are chronicling in our business archives. Oh, that's fine. And this is how actually, when Godrej started developing, actually constructing their factories at Vikhroli, we have been actually, documenting these kind of pictures as well. So a lot of employees have these pictures, even Godrej Construction has these pictures. So we kept interacting with everyone that, whether you have these old pictures with you. So this is how the collection started building up. And these are the spaces also actually through, a lot of information, because this is the Lal Bagh factory where actually Godrej started in 1897. And somebody told us that there are some old records kept there. And this is how they were kept there in 2006. But when we actually searched through that, we really got very interesting histories. And that blueprint that you see is really amazing, because it talks about planning plantation of Ashoka trees on the Vikhroli campus. So, even those kind of details that we found in this kind of a collection. So whenever even you are discarding files, please think twice that there might be something historical that you might be throwing away. So we also are trying to do the product histories. So some of the products which have, caught the national imagination, because typewriter, Godrej produced the first all-Indian typewriter, because till then, till 1955, we were only importing the typewriters. So Godrej actually took that step and manufactured the first all-Indian typewriter. When I say all-Indian, out of almost 1,800 parts, only 4 parts were imported, and everything was manufactured in Godrej. And this is how you can actually see Nehru, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Justice Chagla, Indira Gandhi, because of course the government offices and most of the institutional offices were our buyers, and typewriter was of course the main symbol of the communication. So that's why that was a very important product. And if you can see, notice where Dr. Rajendra Prasad is, there is a line says India can make it. And that was the exhibition that was held in 50s, where a lot of Indian manufacturers were displayed their products as such. So this is really very interesting to look at these kind of things. And then, of course, you might be familiar with a lot of these kind of furniture, which, I still spot even here. So how actually products really define office spaces, how, even that actually is an interesting study that, because we haven't really thought of our offices, because where we spend most of our lives, we haven't even thought of that there might be a history of that office furniture, that office space, how it has really evolved. So these are the, things that really matter when we are as a historian looking into this. how actually the records were kept, how Godrej cupboards also played a part in keeping the records safe. And also in the house, stowell and refrigerator became a symbol of, middle class ambition, because from 60s and 70s, suddenly middle classes, when the purchase power went up, they also started looking, these were the aspirational products then. Now, today, of course, you don't look at it as an aspirational product, they have become necessity, but refrigerator or, cupboard for middle classes was an aspiration then. So, and even the processes of manufacturing these kind of things. So even an engineer's diary becomes very important for us to understand how the typefaces were designed. This is like how the Devanagari was designed for a typewriter. We also have lots of keyboard designs, which were done by Godrej, along with, of course, the government committees, that how the regional typewriters, regional languages typewriters can be really designed.
Steel almirahs were always referred to as Godrej.
Yes, they have become almost like synonymous. Yes, yeah, yes, yes, exactly. And especially in West Bengal and Calcutta, they would refer it as a Godrej. And then, of course, the processes. Like, for example, this is one of my favorite one, the left-hand side one, which says inscription made in India should be marked on each and every package exported to Karachi. That's in 1949. Now, suddenly, Karachi becomes a foreign place, and therefore now you have to inscribe made in India. Now this is a really very routine kind of an admin kind of a thing for anyone, but now it becomes really historical because it's 2 years after independence and still they are thinking about this, they're applying for export licenses. So even these processes matter, how these little changes really add to the history. And then, of course, the printing processes have changed over a period of time. So when we found these print blocks, now when we are explaining to the youngsters, we have to also explain them the process of printing, because now they only see the digital prints. So this is how the print blocks that we discovered at our Lal Bagh factory also really add to the history of Godrej. And then people are, of course, our important assets. Engineers, designers, everybody has a story to tell. And therefore, I was talking about the oral history projects that are really very important for us. And this is one which we really love talking to Mr. G.K. Datar. He is no more now. But Godrej also works closely with ISRO. ISRO engineers are stationed at Godrej because Godrej manufactures a lot of, parts for ISRO's projects like Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, and also PSLV, GSLVs. Godrej makes engines for them. And for one of the technology hydraulic expander, Godrej actually developed it in-house for ISRO because it was costing almost 5 times more if we had to import from US. And Datar was sent to US to study the technology. He came back and said, yes, we can do it in-house. And that's how hydraulic expander was made, which actually gives the conical shape to the engine. There were a lot of technologies like RVBF, which is rotary vacuum breathing facility, that was also developed in-house for ISRO at Godrej. So these are the things which are really not known to people, that how these kind of things were being done. And therefore these oral histories, because we had no records of these. So when he told us in this oral history, then only we came to know about this story of a hydraulic expander. And of course, you see Abdul Kalam as an engineer from DRDL who had come to receive one of the products Godrej made then.
Abdul Kalam joined about through an interview held in this building.
Oh. Right.
That was his first hire into ISRO.
Oh, okay. And then this is, of course, means TIFR has made the first computer, but this is just the little computers that offices started using in 70s. And this is also one of the oral history that told us employees' experience when they were actually first introduced to the computers and how they had to adjust to this new technology because nobody was trained then. If you see what kind of memory that they were dealing with was really amazing. That 32 kbytes we can't even think of now, or even programming languages that they are talking about. But it is really interesting to see how people are responding to all these changes. And that's what I think archives is all about, understanding and recording these changes in the institution and how people are responding to them, because that's what the interesting history is all about. And then, of course, there are like a lot of broader narratives that how industrial India was, because Godrej was part of the bigger Indian industry. So even, whatever was happening in the Indian industry was also impacting Godrej. So these were some of the magazines that Godrej engineers were subscribing then. And this is one of our really interesting collection that we have, because in 50s and 60s, how the industries were growing up. If somebody wants to know, these are the magazines which can actually throw light on. And then, of course, we love the covers, because Burma Shell actually hired some of the designers to do these kind of covers for them. So this is something, that it's not just the Godrej story then, then it goes beyond it, and it is connected with many things around Godrej, because there are also like very small scale businesses that also mushroomed because of the Godrej when they started in Vikhroli. So all these things, interconnections, have to be really archived, and then only we can get a really very interesting multi-layered kind of a history of our nation. And so therefore one doesn't have to stop at the storage, but they have to keep engaging with the community that the archives is part of, so that more and more stories can come in the archives, and we can become like more multi-perspective kind of an archives, because we do not want to be only telling Godrej story from the Godrej lens, but it has to be people's story. And therefore, we don't really stop at the storage, but I think I will leave at something for the discussions, that how we are engaging with the community in different ways. So over to you, Mortimer. Sorry.
Vrunda, thank you. Vrunda, thank you so much for setting up the conversation so beautifully and eloquently, and leading us again through this idea of interconnectedness, which is something I think we'd like to talk about after our individual presentations, because it really goes to the key of why we're here today. I think without further ado, I think I'd like to call upon Oindrila now to talk to us about the very institution that we're standing in today, the storied collection of the TIFR. Oindrila, if I may, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mortimer. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about the TIFR collection in front of the TIFR community, but it is also very challenging because most of you know about the collection. But I would like to give you some stories and anecdotes about some of the paintings that you see regularly, but you don't know the story behind them. So, as we all know, TIFR is an institute of Government of India for doing fundamental research in physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, and computer science. But apart from that, TIFR also has a priceless collection of art, which makes it unique among any of the research institutes or any of the institutes in the world, maybe. And the first and the most important thing that I would like to say, that TIFR owns and manages this collection. This collection is not Homi Bhabha's personal collection. Many of the people think that this painting collection was Homi Bhabha's collection. Homi Bhabha's collection was in his house where he lived, and which was auctioned after J.J. Bhabha passed away. But this collection that we see at TIFR is TIFR collection, which of course is because of the vision of Homi Bhabha and also of Professor M.G.K. Menon, who took over after Homi Bhabha's death. So TIFR owns and manages this collection. This collection was bought by the TIFR's finances, basically. So, as I have told you, Professor Menon played also a very important role. Homi Bhabha, of course, started collection when TIFR was functioning from Old Yacht Club, which was in 1952. And after Homi Bhabha's death in 1966, Professor Menon started collecting for the institute, and the collection continued. And here is a graph which you see how the collection grew and how the collection, slowly slowly it stopped after 1997. So you see that during Professor Shrikanthan's time and during Professor Virendra Singh's time also, some of the artworks were collected by the institute, at least some of the busts of C.V. Raman, Chandrasekhar, that they were collected during this time. But the maximum of paintings was collected during Bhabha's time, and after that, some of the iconic paintings of TIFR that we see, that is especially the Dead and the Dying, and some of all the Tayab Mehta that we see, that they were all collected by Professor Menon. Please see that after, when the stone laying happened in 1954, see the peak at 1954 and also in 1962. Another thing I would like to point out here is that the mural I have kept in 1966. The mural was completed in 1964, but somehow the accessioning was done in 1966. So as per the accession record, it has gone in 1966. But obviously the mural, as you have seen the mural and you have seen the signature, it was completed by Hussain in 1964. This was the first painting which was bought by Bhabha in 1952. This is by an artist called Hazarnes. He was also the art teacher of Cathedral School where Bhabha studied. Not that Bhabha learned painting from him. I'm not trying to say that, but at least he was the teacher of Cathedral School, and this was his first painting that Bhabha bought in 1952. We have a few of works by Hazarnes in the collection. This bust of Einstein, of course, is the most important thing in the sense that this closely aligns with the work of the institute. This was bought around 1952-53, and during that time, Bhabha paid almost like 4,000 rupees for the bust, and you can imagine it was an astronomical amount in those days. But he could manage to, get it from abroad. That is also very important. That this is the bust of Einstein by Epstein. This also was bought when Epstein was alive. So that is also very important, because after his death also, these are the casts and many of them were in the market. But this was bought when he was alive, still alive. So though these are these are basically copies of the. I think they are in various places, isn't it?
These are editions, so it's one part. Every one in itself is unique.
Unique, and made by the artist himself. Yeah.
But an artist is allowed to make editions.
Yeah. So the Gaitonde, of course, we know the most celebrated artist of modern India now, and we have 12 Gaitondes in the collection. And the most important thing that we would like to point out is that these are some of the early Gaitondes which you really don't get to see in many collections. Because when you talk about Gaitonde, obviously that Gaitonde is the abstract painter. You get to see his paintings, but you really don't get to see these kind of paintings, these are the early works which were bought in 1952-53 by Bhabha, and you see the similarity with the Indian miniatures and also some influence of Paul Klee in the figures. Now from Gaitonde's journey also we can see, when we see how from those figuratives he goes into abstraction. So some of these paintings that we have in the collection. Now, some of the gems of Hussain. Hussain, of course, was a good friend of Bhabha's. He was the one who introduced Krishan Khanna to Bhabha. Krishan Khanna's first painting that Bhabha bought is a beautiful spring nude that we have, but unfortunately, it is always in the store. Hussain used to be here a regular person, regular visitor to Bhabha's house. And there are some of the beautiful paintings by Hussain in the collection, apart from the mural, which we are going to talk about later. So this is the lamp. This is Nritya, the horses, Ala. Now we come to a person who, of course, is not very familiar. The name is not very well known. That is, we are going to talk about two war emigres, that is Rudy von Leyden and Walter Langhammer. So both of them landed in Bombay in the early 30s. And Rudy von Leyden joined Times of India as the art critic and Walter Langhammer as the art director. And Rudy von Leyden, of course, was instrumental in shaping both of them were instrumental in shaping the art scene of Bombay after independence, or maybe during that time after they came. Rudy von Leyden, this painting is a painting by Walter Langhammer. He painted his friend Rudy von Leyden, and the name of the painting is The Critic. All of you have seen the painting. It's just on the opposite to the West Canteen. And look at the painting. It is the painting of Rudy von Leyden looking at an ancient Indian sculpture. So the critic, the name of the painting is The Critic because he is trying to look at the sculpture, and the painting was gifted to TIFR by Rudy von Leyden himself. So that way the connection is very important, and the painting itself is also a very precious collection. And Rudy von Leyden was a friend of Bhabha. He played a very important role in advising Bhabha about the acquisition of the paintings. And many a times you see that especially during the committee was set up to decide on the artist who will do the mural, and Rudy von Leyden was a member of that committee. After Homi Bhabha died, we had a book was published called Homi Bhabha as Artist, and in that book, Rudy von Leyden writes about Bhabha's love for art, and he writes, Dr. Bhabha felt very strongly that the cerebral activity of scientists had to find its counterpoint in the activity of the senses in art. So you can see that what was the basic cause, why did Bhabha buy paintings? Because he believed in this, that the scientists who will work at TIFR will also get to see beautiful paintings around them. So that was the main reason he bought paintings from the artists. Now, another thing that I would like to say is that Bhabha, there is always a notion that works of progressive artists group you will get to see in TIFR. But the TIFR collection is not only the works of the progressive artist group, but it is basically about the artists of that particular time who painted and exhibited in Bombay and Baroda. Most of the artists. It basically gives you a picture of the Indian art scene of that particular time, which was not dominated by any particular group. This is a painting by Souza, who was the founder of the Progressive Artist Group. It's a very early work because Souza's later work, he always signed as Souza, whereas here you see the work is Newton, because it is Francis Newton Souza, and then at that time he used to sign as Newton. So this is a very early work, and you see the influence of, pardon? And this work is, see the similarity in the palette with Walter Langhammer. Walter Langhammer and Rudy von Leyden played a very important role in guiding these artists, basically. And of course, their work, they were very much influenced by the work of Walter Langhammer, especially Souza. This is a work of Raza. We are mainly familiar with Raza's work as a landscape or Bindu or all these things, but this is a very different kind of work that we have. It's a realistic depiction of the CJ Hall, which is now the National Gallery of Modern Art. So after Bhabha's death, I told you that Professor Menon also collected some of the very fascinating works for the Institute, Perception by Swaminathan, and this is by The Dead and the Dying by Krishan Khanna. And apart from that, all the tabs. Here I'm going to show you the two, and the other one, the Great Diagonal also. They were all bought by Professor Menon after Bhaba's death. The Nasreen Mohammadi, you see, the Baroda artists also they have a considerable presence in the TIFR collection. It is not only the artists who are from Bombay, but also Baroda school artists are there. That is why we have a lot of Bendre and other people. So in this 5-7 minutes, it's not possible to show everybody's work, but Nasreen is celebrated as a modern master, and this is the only work of Nasreen that we have, which I would like to show it to the audience. Ada, of course, remained a friend of TIFR throughout his life. We have 26 paintings by Ada, and Ada is mostly known for his still life and nudes. But in TIFR collection, you see there are some different kind of Ara also. And the first painting, that Deccan Dancer, is from Rudy von Leyden's collection. This was Rudy von Leyden himself purchased it, and then later TIFR got it from Rudy von Leyden. It was not donated to TIFR, but I think TIFR bought this painting from Rudy von Leyden's collection. And the other one was given to TIFR by the Pugwash Society. That is the Lest We Forget His Sacrifice. You see the agony of Christ and the agony of people and the mushroom clouds. Please see the mushroom clouds. Now, to have a painting like this in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, doing research in nuclear physics and atomic energy itself is also something that we can think of. Okay, now we don't have many works by Bhaba, but this is the only painting that we have, oil paint, and the one sketch that we have, you can see there in the corner of this lecture hall, there, that sketch. That sketch was given to TIFR by Professor Menon in 2015. Myself and Mortimer, we went to his house to get a few of the paintings and sketches. So this is one of them. And this painting, I recently got this newspaper clipping from the archive where it tells that Symphony, a painting by Dr. Homi J. Bhabha, chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, who is also a noted amateur artist. This is the first one of his works to be publicly shown in India and is on view at Bombay's Jehangir Art Gallery as the part of the Collector's Choice exhibition. Unfortunately, I have no idea about the date when this was published, because I have only this part of the clipping. No date is mentioned. So I really don't know, but maybe, you know, sometimes in the 50s, I think this must have been, if I ever get to know that there was an exhibition called Collector's Choice, then you know the date. What is the? Yeah. So that was the time when this painting was exhibited. In fact, now I will talk a little bit about Bhabha and his interest in art. As a child also, he was very much interested in painting and art. And when he went to Cambridge, Cambridge opened up a whole world of art for him. And he was very fascinated with Picasso. In 1932, he writes a letter to his grandfather saying that I have been to the Picasso exhibition. I have been there more than once, and I find it very fascinating. Like this, he is writing. And in 1933, there is a letter which Bhabha's father writes to Bhabha saying that you have changed the subject. We wanted you to do mechanical engineering. You wanted to do physics. Now you want to become an artist. This cannot happen. You cannot stop philandering with art. No matter whatever interest or talent you have, you once a scholar, always a scholar. You have to stick to whatever you are doing, and you have to finish that. So at 1933, must have suggested to his father that I want to become an artist and give up physics. But at that time, his father, you have to read the letter and see that how his father is scolding him by saying nothing doing. You cannot swap horses midstream. That is what he says. You have to finish the thing. So Anyway, he finished his PhD and all that, but he was always very fascinated with Picasso. I will tell you later why I'm mentioning this Picasso thing. When he came back to India, he was a life member of the Bombay Art Society. There were many exhibitions where he was a chief guest. In fact, the third exhibition of the Progressive Artist Group, Bhabha was the chief guest for the particular exhibition. So we have the invitation card where it's written that Dr. Homi Jehangir Bhabha will grace the occasion. It's signed by Ara. So we have the invitation card from the archives, but I'm not getting, I think it will become very long. Now we talk about the sculptures. The most important person who is very well represented in the TIFR collection is Daviyarwala. He used to work in all possible mediums, metal, wood, cement, marble, every medium, wood. So we have these type of metal works. All of you, as you pass in the corridors or in the A block reception, must have seen this. One story I would like to tell about the other, that is the Thunderbird. That is, there is a noting by K. Chandrasekharan, who was the head of mathematics. He was, in fact, the dean of maths. He writes that I have been to the exhibition of Daviyarwala, and I want to tell you that Air India is eyeing to buy that Thunderbird, and I think we should buy it. So, and I think they were prompt enough to go and get it because we have this. And Mrs. Parekh told me that they got something else from that same exhibition. So that is how the collections were happening, that they were going and directly. And in the brochure I have seen beside Thunderbird, it's written reserved for, booked for TIFR. That brochure of that exhibition is still in the archives. So some of his works. There are other sculptures by various other sculptors like Raghav Kanaria, Pilu Pochkhanwala, Shankha Chaudhuri, he is from Baroda School. We have a set of lithographs at TIFR, and I really don't know whether you can tell us which lithograph is kept where, but the Tayeb, the Hussein and the Gaitonde is just outside director's office. The Blue Christ is in the auditorium, and coming to the city is on the third floor corridor. Now, you see this has a story. This is also from what we have got from the archives, that these were done in 1958, and when the artists came together to form a group called Sheila Lake. And this is the first time the artists came together to explore the medium of graphic medium for the purpose of making available works of art at a nominal cost, because these artists' works were already very expensive and beyond the power of purchase for the common man. TIFR, of course, purchased them in 1973. So the exchange of letters, they are there in the archives. We have a few antiquities, and they are all registered with the Department of Antiquities. And now we talk about the mural. So you see, when TIFR was inaugurated in 1962, the place where we have the mural was a blank wall. And I think they decided to have a mural and thought of asking various artists to submit their entries. So 13 artists were asked to submit entries, of which 10 people responded. Now, these 10 entries are there in TIFR all over. You can see, if you just move around the institute, you will get to see all the entries are there. Now, a committee was formed, and the committee was there to decide on who will be commissioned to do the mural. And the committee, Rudy Van Leyden was one of the members of the committee. K. Chandrasekharan, who was the dean of mathematics, was the other member. Karl Khandalawala, who was a renowned lawyer and also an expert in miniature paintings. He was the chairman of the museum for almost 40 years. He was one of the members, and the other member was Firoza Wadia. Now, these people decided to give the commission to Hussain. Now, when all these things was happening, Bhabha wrote a letter to J.D. Bernal, the scientist, asking Bernal that whether he can talk to Picasso and convince him to come to TIFR and do the mural. Because you see that, so his fascination for Picasso always remained. And he is writing to Bernal that, we will pay for his airfare, 1 month stay in Taj. Then we will take him around to see the archaeological sites of India, but he can come and do the mural for us, because J.D. Bernal and Picasso, they were associated and they knew each other. They were sort of friends. And while Picasso was there in Bernal's place, he scratched something on the wall, which became Bernal's Picasso. So that is with the Wellcome Trust now, right? And so Bhabha tried that. We don't know what was Picasso's reaction. We did not get a Picasso, but at least we got a Hussain. So with this, I finish my part of the presentation, and
No. So we also need to, the people have to sit together, and especially being also the topic announcement. It's good if you can make it by the 7 minutes.
I forgot to complete.
Oindrila, thank you so much for the introduction to the collection of TIFR. And just to provide context to this segment of the talks, really TIFR, Air India and the Taj. I'm going to touch on Air India and the Taj right now. These three, for me, really come together, touching upon something which Oindrila mentioned, which is revisiting a moment in our art history which actually seems to go against the grain of the received orthodox art history of the period, which is that we are faced with a predominant group of male artists, the progressive artist group, who in a sense dominated the landscape of the visual arts scene at that particular moment. Whereas the collections themselves seem to tell a different story. All three collections seem to tell a different story. And here I'm reminded of the words of Alfred Barr, who was the first director of MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, who talked about the mandate of a contemporary art collection being metaphorically like a comet, its head in the present, its tail in the ever-receding past. And in that sense, collections such as these three talk to a very specific moment of contemporaneity and the moment of the present. And they lie in wait then for historians to revisit them over time, to actually, in a sense, in some kind of archaeological sense, dig what these collections can tell us about the moments in which they were built. My sense is that the story which these three collections talk to us about is encapsulated in a 1965 essay by an artist called Badri Narayan. He writes the essay in a journal called the Lalit Kala Contemporary, in which he theorizes an idea of the artists of the third epoch. Basically, what he's saying is that in this period between the late 1940s up to the late 1960s, there's a tumult in the arts ecosystem wherein there are many, many artists coming together, and through short-lived alliances, both in person but also by reputation, artists are moving within alignment to each other's styles, out of each other's styles, moving into alignment with someone else, And it's these short-lived alliances that really speak to this moment, the artists of the third epoch. And it is not this idea of one small group of men who come together actually for a very short space of time. The Progressive Artists Group really is only in existence between 48 and 54. And of course, even then, the main proponents of the PAG have actually left India by 1949, 1950, which is actually outside the scope of a number of these collections. So briefly touching on Air India, the Air India collection is built under the auspices, of course, of JRD Tata. Within Air India, there's Bobby Cooker, who's a part of the marketing department at Air India. And in a short space of time, in fact, very much in the same period that TIFR is collecting, there's a huge acquisitions push. Why is that? Well, of course, number one, there's an interest, as is the case in TIFR and Homi Bhabha, in the idea of young contemporary art somehow speaking to the aspirations of young India. Secondly, of course, I think Air India in particular thinks of art in an ambassadorial role. It's a way of promoting art in an international capacity. And so in short order, we find artists' work being included not only in things like promotional material, i.e. Menu cards and in the aeroplanes themselves, but also in booking offices around the world. So artists are commissioned to make major works, which are then put in to Geneva, London, New York, wherever in Air India has outposts. So I think that ambassadorial role becomes very important. But it's also a collection that goes beyond just paintings and sculptures. It is, in fact, a collection which incorporates textiles, clocks, antiquities. It's a vastly eclectic collection, of which it would take actually a long time to go into. But just to say, that is the Air India collection, the second of the three I wanted to talk about. And the third of the three is the one for which I'm actually going to talk about more in detail today. That is the Taj Mahal Palace Art Collection, which is built, in a sense, if we look at TIFR being built between, let's say, 54, 55, up to, as you said, Oindrila, into the 70s and 80s. The Taj collection then comes after the Air India collection. Air India is again 50s into the 70s. Taj collection really starts in the 1960s. It's the product of the vision of two women. One is Elizabeth Kerker, the wife of Ajit Kerker, the then MD of IHCL, the Taj Group. And the second is Mrs. Rhodabai Soni, who's the sister of JRD Tata. And these two women are mandated with the interior design of the hotel. Of course, the hotel itself is opened in 1903, but it's really in the 1960s that these two women are engaged with a process of acquisition. The way they go about that is buying directly from the Taj Art Gallery. So at that time, let's remember, before 1963, there were very few spaces in Bombay to exhibit art. The Taj is one of those spaces. And in fact, it's in this space, which is today in the Palace wing in the lobby lounge, great art gallery, which played host to many of the good and the great of that period. At that time, if you were an artist and you didn't have a gallery, you had to, in a sense, be self-supporting. You were your own marketing agent. So you would book out the Taj and you would inhabit the space for a week or two. And of course, the Taj then often became a patron for those artists exhibiting. What that meant is that over a period of 20 years, from the 60s to the 80s, the hotel could actually trade artists' careers, especially those who were not aligned with commercial art galleries. One of those was Jehangir Sabharwala. Sabharwala, the quintessential Bombay artist who trained in France and then came back to India in the 1950s, was actually the son of a general manager of the Taj and was actually often in the hotel when making his works. And here indeed is a work which he painted in the hotel itself. It's called Sails in the Harbour. And perhaps you can you can there see the space outside the hotel onto the Gateway of India Harbour and there onto over the creek. And in fact, as I said, you can then trace almost 30 years of artistic practice in the Taj's art collection, a little like the same we can do with TIFR in the case of someone like Gaitonde, as Oindrila has shown us earlier. So these are incredibly important from a art historical sense. As I said at the beginning, prior to the talks, it's because we don't have museums that can do this job that it is then corporate collections such as TIFR, Taj, Air India that we look to for these stories. Again, as in the case of TIFR, a wonderful collection in Taj of the work of V.S. Gaitonde, where Oindrila was showing us works from the 1940s, early 50s. Here we go into the mature phase of the artist's career in the 1970s. Some of these were exhibited in the Guggenheim's retrospective of the artist in 2014-15. And of course, what becomes so interesting is that, as I said, these collections are waiting then for art historians to rediscover them. In the same way that Oindrila marked the fact that Daviawala is perhaps the most eclectic artist in TIFR's collection, she and I, and Vrunda, of course, who was also involved with the collection, will tell you that no one was looking at Daviawala's work 10, 15 years ago. Today, he is one of the most celebrated sculptors we have of the 20th century in India. It is collections like this that, in a sense, become laboratories for our future art historians to rediscover practices. If we saw at the TIFR's collection of Raza, in the 1940s, 50s. We revisit him again in 1968 here in the Taj's collection. And one thing I would point out is that the Taj collection is a hotel art collection. The two women I mentioned earlier were lucky to be collecting at a point in time when abstraction was the form in which, or the mode in which, most artists were painting. At that point in time, the winds of abstraction moved from the US and Europe to India. That helps a hotel art collection. Why? Because figurative paintings can often scare your guests at night, and if you're the housekeeping, you will be called to remove the paintings forthwith if they're giving your guests nightmares. So despite the fact that these are two of the most celebrated artists we have in the country today, Dayab Mehta and Vivan Sundaram, both in the Taj's collection. Sadly, they can't be put in prominent places in hotel suites because obviously there is depictions which will scare the guests. Just to say, post 2611, there was in 2008, of course, there was a period in which the hotel had to renovate substantially many of the spaces that had been destroyed. It gave, therefore, an opportunity to re-engage with the arts ecosystem in Bombay as it was at that time. So we were able to commission new works and also revitalize the design and display of artworks. That continues to this day. And in a little like TIFR, we now have regular walkthroughs of the collection, and engagement with public, of course, is something hopefully we can talk about after Puja's presentation. We're short of time. I think I'm going to stop here, and I'll invite Puja to talk to us about JNAF, Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mort. And thank you, Oindrila, for organizing this. I think it's so important to have these conversations, like we said before. So I'm really happy to be here. The one thing, I know there's not much time, so I'll try and be very brief. The one thing I want to say is that I think the one thing I want to say about the Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation is that I think we're a little different from all the presentations that you saw today. because all the others are kind of these big industrial houses or institutions that have built collections, whereas this was built by a private collector, and it has now become an institution of art. So our primary mandate and our existence is around art. So it is a little different like that, because everything that we do is focused around promoting art. So just to give you a brief history of the collection. So this is our space right now. The collection was built by someone called Jehangir Nicholson, and he was born in 1915. It's interesting because he was also a generation of people, like his family built their fortunes on the cotton trade, you know, which was how Bombay was really kind of came up. So you'll see these are photographs taken by Nicholson. He was part of this big kind of industry of cotton, the cotton trade. And soon, it's actually after his wife died in the 60s. And it's interesting that there are some linkages to the Taj and other collections that were built around the same time. You'll find overlaps because he started collecting when he went to the Taj Hotel and went to the gallery. And he was good friends with Keku Gandhi, who owns the, who used to own the Kemol Gallery. And sorry, I think something happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just taking out this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry for this.
Yeah. So that's when he literally by chance walked into the gallery and bought his first painting. And that kind of became a lifelong passion for him that started in the 60s. And here you see he bought his first painting, and then through the only two galleries that existed at that point of time, Pandols and Kemol, he acquired a few works and he became very friendly with most of the artists. So it's also talking about the time when, you know, there wasn't so many avenues for art. Artists were also looking, and collectors, artists, all were kind of, you know, working on things together, finding avenues to present and exhibit. So this is him with Hussain. Hussain was the first one who he became really friendly with, and he taught him a lot about art, he says. And much later it was also Raza, and then Bhupen Kakkar, Gaitonde, and much later he became very good friends with Lakshman Shresha. So a lot of the works were bought like that. You see the sort of camaraderie he shared with some of these early artists. He was also a photographer himself, so we've got like a brilliant collection of actually photographs by Nicholson of different artists. Here you see how he became quite an important figure to promote art at that time. And, you know, some of the exhibitions that happened, this Coup de Guerre was a big exhibition that happened in Geneva. Here you see the Hurwitzes who gave their collection to the Peabody Essex Museum in the US. And this was at the Jehangir Art Gallery with Indira Gandhi and Hussain. So he was very much a part of this. When Bharat Bhavan opened, you know, he was also very instrumental in that. He was there. And this is just to show you some of the artworks. Of course, we have like over 800 artworks by about 250 artists. And can't show everything, but I've put together very few which might find resonances with artists that you have here. So that's Krishan Khanna, Gaitonde, which everyone's spoken about. It's just interesting to see some of the archives that we have, bills of, 2,700 rupees. I think a Gaitonde, I don't know, Mort would be able to tell. I think maybe it's like 40 crores or something now. But yeah, so this was in the 70s. Ara, which again, I think Oindrila also presented. MF Hussain, of course, Madam C. So I'm not going into too much. And like Maud said, I think one of the interesting things for me when I joined JNF was also the finds that you have in these collections that were built contemporarily, like, you know, while the artists were alive, because there are things that are no longer spoken about. Now, a lot of these artists have become very famous, like both Maud and Oindrila said. So Adi Davierwala, which you have speckled all over your campus, Pilu Pochkanwala, who's now being sort of spoken about. So there are a lot of these. Also, you know, the early histories of Bombay. I think that's what made Bombay was through philanthropy, and Nicholson was one of them. And, you know, like these are portraits that we have by Homi Bhabha, you know, like works by Homi Bhabha that we have. This is also a physicist, you all would know, Patrick Blackett. And so like Bhabha, there's also work we have by Jehangir Bhavnagri, who was also a very interesting character. He used to live in France, and just before, like, the war emigrants, but he was also from Bombay. So he came just before the World War II. He came to Bombay, and he was instrumental in setting up the Indian documentary format, the progression of Indian documentary. He was head of films division. He was a chief advisor to the Information and Broadcasting Ministry. And he also worked for Tata and Sons at one point, So I'm just saying there are lots of things to still be discovered through things that we have. Sometime in the 70s, Nicholson realized that he's built a amazing, like a huge collection, and he thought it was worthy of, being put in a museum, and he wanted to build a museum. So he actually started talking to the governor, and the letter exchanges that we have, where he's written about what his vision for a museum is. He wanted space, which he passed away, and there are many letters where he's like, before my life ends, I want to do this for the city, where I build a museum which will have changing shows and also my collection and other collections. We also found this proposed plan for a map. He visited all over the world and took photos of museums at Simon Bilbao in his recce for how to make a museum of art in Bombay. So he didn't manage to build a museum because space in Bombay is a very contested issue, as we all know. But he did manage to make different alliances, and this is through the NCPA, of course. So he gave them a donation, and he managed to get some space, which he called very ambitiously the Nicholson Museum of Modern Art. It was only partially part of his collection. And he also kind of did collaborative exhibitions with institutions like the British Council and, other institutions. So that's how it looked like it started. Sorry, this was in, why is it going back? Sorry. Okay, that's it. How do I go back? Sorry. Yeah, sorry, just a second. So this started in 1976. And it was on a little after Nicholson's death. Now, after he passed away, he had written in his will to the executors of his will that his wish was that his entire collection be made available to the public of Bombay, either in a museum or something. So these are the things that I find really amazing in Bombay. Like the two people are Mr. Cyrus Gazdar and Kaiwan Kalyaniwala, who have very little to do with art otherwise. Mr. Cyrus Gazdar was Nicholson's godson, and Mr. Kalyaniwala was his lawyer, part of his team of lawyers. And they actually honored the will and made this alliance with the museum. And I mean, I have a lot to do with them, like even in terms of budgeting. So I'm constantly like reaching out to them. One is a businessman, one is a lawyer. They have enough to do. So I'm just saying, but it's interesting that, they took this forward, and this is the institution now where we stand is at the CSMVS Museum, the Prince of Wales Museums, where we run the modern and contemporary art wing. So this is when the JNF collection, like we opened with a show, and this is the gallery. We have also created an office space. There's a library. We have an open storage, open visible storage. Where you can see we like conserve, keep our paintings all restored. It's great to have support from the museum and the conservation team. We have people give us their collections also. So we have a large archive we have the entire archive of Foy Nissen, which is, the heritage movement and all lots of buildings that are documented by Foy Nissen. This I've included, this is some of the shows that we do. So this is the Gaitonde show we did, for which we also borrowed from the TIFR. This is how we do. We extend into the museum as well with certain interventions. This is just to show you some of the shows. One of these shows, this was last year. And here, we kind of try and, for us, public engagement is kind of community building, public engagement, really reaching out to the public through art is something that is really something that we do at the museum. And I think this was an exhibition which also was very interactive because it had like a projection, which was an AI program, which responded to sound inputs in the gallery. So you can see how audiences kind of interacting with the work. This is currently on at the gallery if anyone wants to come and see. We also have publications for each of our exhibitions. This is places where we have loaned and our collection has gone to different exhibitions internationally. This is just what we do. If anyone wants to get involved, we have internships, docent programs. We have a lot of public engagement for anyone wanting to get involved. So this is what we do. And I think I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks very much for those wonderful replies. Welcome to all your work and also lots of interesting facts that came on. But the panel discussion obviously has to have discussion. So therefore, I suggest that we quickly set up. Maybe if you can sit down and relax for about 10 minutes. The panelists will you can initiate the discussion. But most importantly, you want to take questions from yeah, okay, because you all already said. Yeah, just give us a few minutes. So yeah, please.
I've got a question for the started long before the recording effort.
Yes.
I mean, Godrej industries.
Just hold on for a second.
Okay.
Let me invite
It's
all
good.
the panelists with the podium.
Okay.
Please.
Where do you want to sit?
Maybe in the interest of time, you could just sit in the same alphabetical and whatever order you'll find yourselves in. So, please.
So may I continue? Yeah. So the question for Vrunda is that, you spoke about the Godrej Industries in the Vikhroli campus from about 1970s. But of course, Godrej dates far back, far beyond, right from the locksmith days. I mean, that whole bunch of papers in those sacks, was there something relating to those early days? Or is there some information you have?
Yeah, actually, the space that you saw with those, almost like lots of papers there, that was actually the Lal Bagh factory where Godrej started in 1897. So those factory sheds are still there. That is actually near Lal Bagh Sa Ganpati. So that's the area. And there is a Bombay Gas Company lane where at the end of it, Godrej sheds are still there. So that's where actually they started. So we have very few documents from that era. And in that pile of records, we actually didn't find any from that era. But in 1997, when Godrej was celebrating the centenary, the family as well as employees, they actually thought of archives then. It wasn't formally started, but they started collecting these things. In that, they had collected, lots of documents from the family and that is actually reflecting on that era. Very few, but the earliest that we have in our record is from 1836, which is actually the property records of Godrej family. And then even in the photographs, we have as early as 1880s, which is again the family related. So we have both family history as well as business history, but we have those records, but very few. Yeah.
I'm sure those would be really interesting.
Oh, yes, they are. And in fact, the pile of record is actually covering the 40s and 70s, which was missing, which we actually tried to recover when, in 2006, it formally started.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
So this is to Mortimer. So, you talked about the commonalities between the TIFR collection and the Taj and the Eridea collection. Now, one person is common to all of these, that is J.R.D. Tata. So I just wanted to know what was the role of J.R.D. Tata in setting up these collections?
I've thought about this in the very recent past. I think J.R.D. as a person was someone who, when he delegated, he genuinely allowed the individual to take on their role in a very autonomous manner, and his interference seemed to be limited and minimal. And I think in his case, it's precisely the absence of a top-down influence, which actually allowed these individuals in their respective organizations to actually run with the baton and create collections which were of significance. And they were allowed to actually nurture their own innate interests in art. That means Bobby Cooker, Homi Bhabha, and the two women, Mrs. Kerker and Mrs. Sawhney. So it's precisely, I think his character was such that it wasn't about JRD's vision, but it was actually him allowing others to pursue their own vision, which was important.
That's very interesting. But I mean, there must have been some level of patronage or some encouragement given to these people. Because, for example, Air India, we know that there's that famous Dali, whatever it was, ashtray.
The Dali ashtray.
Yes. So that, I suppose, was JRD's, wasn't it? Or it was, he had just left it to other people, delegated the job. Just curious.
Yeah, great question. And why Dali in particular was, I wish we had Uttara with us this afternoon, that she would have told us the stories. In fact, she did at Art Mumbai. I think that JRD, his own personal collecting habits seem to be fairly minimal. And we know, of course, his interests were aviation, and I think he was very hands-on. He loved to tinker in the garage. He had his own machines. If one goes to TCA at the Tata Central Archives in Pune, you can actually see his hand tooling machines, which he was given by Sumant Mulgaonkar. His relationship with visual arts, perhaps slightly less on a personal.
Thanks.
But I think something that you brought out and which Vrunda then answered is very much this idea of archives having to necessarily look beyond their own histories often to understand their own histories. This kind of slightly paradoxical situation that oftentimes the company or the person hasn't necessarily left us with enough to go on. So I'd like to tease that idea out with the three of you, if I may, and how each of you has perhaps looked beyond the confines of your own particular collections and archives to then to find, to rummage out those, tease out those interesting and important histories that then can be brought back into the collection themselves to learn from. Perhaps you could maybe each of you tell us a little bit about that journey.
I would give one example. When we were doing the history of typewriters, so Godrej stopped manufacturing manual typewriters in the year 2009, and then we suddenly realized that now the whole ecosystem around the typewriters may disappear. And that's when we actually started, searching for the records, not just from within the company, but we actually started interacting with the typing classes, the typists who were using these, typewriters, and then also Maharashtra State Archives, which is again an amazing, very rich collection. So when we actually started looking through their files, we realized that typewriters have come to India in 1890s itself, not the Godrej ones, but and they also talked about the post of typist being created. So even these things really mattered. Even before Godrej, there was a typewriter history in India, and creating a post of a typist, and then suddenly you have all these lists of the typists in the government offices. So that really became a very fascinating thing. And when we started interacting with these typing classes, how they also started buying these Godrej typewriters. And then they themselves told us a story that Godrej used to hold the Godrej Speed Typing Championships in 80s. And for that, they only used to supply the Godrej typewriters. So, and that was a very prestigious championship because that would fetch you a job of a typist if you are participating. So all typing classes started buying Godrej typewriters, thinking that, if their, pupils start learning on them, they will be the winners of this typing championship. So these are actually, a lot of connected history that, we never imagined when we were going through these kind of, records that we had on at Godrej. But this is how actually, this ecosystem. Then we started even, started talking to the mechanics, the typewriter mechanics, or even those who had other spare part dealers. And suddenly when we were interacting with them, oh, you had stopped manufacturing. Now they started thinking about their own business plan, that now if you are not manufacturing and you were the last manufacturer, where would we go? Then suddenly we realized that there is a typeface maker and in Allahabad, who was the only typeface maker for all the typewriters. And then we went to his factory, because even he would then wrap up. So we documented even his story, because he was supplying lots of these typefaces. But we didn't know these stories, till we started searching for these. Or even like Chor Bazaar is one of the important location for us, where we suddenly found Madhubala ad, that you have also seen it at our exhibition, which we didn't know that Madhubala ever advertised for us. We only know that we started, getting celebrities since 80s, when Vinod Khanna advertised for Synthol. But when we saw at Chor Bazaar Madhubala, and that too in 2017, we discovered that that Madhubala advertised for Godrej, and that was kind of a eureka moment. So yeah, so this is how actually we realized that we have to go and try and see, because there is much more stories outside Godrej, I think. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think if to go outside collections, there's few examples that come to my mind. So we have on our website also, there's a whole section, all our works are up on the website, but there's a whole section called unknown, because literally, and there may be people from JJ School of Art. So there's a lot to discover. Like I still need to, take it to different scholars, people who can maybe identify those works. Then beyond that, we also have a whole archive of Nicholson's things, which is because he was also a photographer. So there's all his cameras and his rolls and things like that. So there is all, and a lot of his personal like diaries, and also things that are like the old diaries of either Air India or Godrej. I don't know, those small little diaries. And so there's another history of even like the kind of things that one uses and things like that. And we, like I was talking about the Foy Nissen archive. So there's a whole section of photography that we are still trying to archive and understand, beyond just those beautiful boxes that don't exist anymore, the photo studio things and all that. Within that, we have like one of the first like gymnasiums, a picture of a gymnasium in Bombay. And at that time, it was interesting when I started researching that gymnasiums were actually earlier made for more akhada. It wasn't really considered, like now that everybody goes to the gym and gets fit. It was something for the lower sort of wrestling and, that kind of bodyguard class. Gyms were for that. And so we have all these like very interesting photos of Bombay history, which, we're still trying to make sense of, alongside like looking at the art archives and the paintings and, that art history. So that's also something that we're doing parallelly. But yeah.
Related to the TIFR archives, I will say that we have lot of correspondence of Bhabha with people in the medical world, because radio activity or radium or all these things were important. There's a lot of correspondence with doctors where he has written, and I think the people who are interested in the treatment of cancer and all that can actually look into the papers and study, because these papers, I don't think they are available anywhere else. And also another thing is that there are many things that we know, but we actually don't know the reason. That is, we all know that Max Born was here in IISc for a short while, and then after that he left IISc. Now, exactly what happened, all these questions that people really don't know, because when people assume that this happened, so that is why he left. But exactly why, what was the reason why he left? All these things, all this information are there in the letters that Bhabha and his father has written, because Bhabha's father was a member of the council at IISc. And many a times Bhabha is asking his father that why did Max Born leave IISc? What is your role in that? So these type of things that at particular time, what was the history of the other science institutes in India, you can look at if you look at the archives of TIFR, because there are many, many important letters and many, many important facts that are there in these letters, which I think those institutions themselves also don't know that these letters exist.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at him and he's looking at me. It's really, I would say it's really sad that I had to ask you to close, because a very interesting discussion that's happening, especially the one that you just opened up right now, would have really led us to another couple of hour discussion of taking connections. But
remember, you sent a video of a person saying that the space program in India was sponsored by the Tatas.
That's right.
So that whole thing led to the entire exhibition that we took out, because that question was raised that, was it only at TIFR? The video was going around saying that the India government has no part to play in the space research program. It was entirely sponsored by the Tatas, because TIFR is the place from where the space program started. So Satya forwarded me that WhatsApp thing, and I started looking at the archives. And when I started looking at the archives, then I realized a whole lot of things, that the space program was under DAE for the first 10 years. So, and then a whole set of information came out, which I sort of did not know. And I don't think many of the people in the institute also knew so well that we have all the papers of the first 10 years of the space program in India. So it came from that stray WhatsApp video which he forwarded to me.
Sir, yeah, quick.
Can I ask a very brief tangent? Financial records impact. I was wondering if there is any tension that gets created when such records come about between the archivist and the institution. I mean, these could in principle be sensitive. How do you navigate that? I was just wondering.
Yeah, actually, there are lots of such documents, especially even labor-related records. So what we have actually done is, just to make institution comfortable with the archives, we have actually given them the option that some information we will keep it confidential and not, we won't make it available for the research and access. But sometimes we also convince that, this is really like 25, 30 years old. So can we like really do that? But financial records, especially those which are published in annual reports, they are okay with. So that they are like fine. And most of the sales and marketing material from 40s, 50s, 60s, they really don't bother. In fact, we never even had a conversation on that so far. But yes, but labor related things, anything related to the legal matters and property matters, yes, so those are actually confidential, and as a policy only, because policies are really very important in the archive. So in the first year itself, we discussed with every business heads in the company that, what kind of records, especially even ISRO related thing, because ISRO is a client, so they will dictate the terms. So, even if, we have all the records of, say, even the expander and all the drawings and everything, we won't be able to open it up until ISRO gives us the clearance. So it depends on case to case, and but businesses have to tell us before even transferring it to us, whether they want to keep it confidential or whether they want to keep it open. We just make it clear. We just make them fill up the form so that we are on the safer side. And archivists have to do that, because otherwise we will be in the trouble and they will just lock the archives. So we don't want to do that. So yeah, so that's how we navigate.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And in fact, I'm carrying one nice comment that you made, or suggestion, that the oral histories must include, employees in quotes who have completed sufficient number of years. You said 25, but that is a rich collection. In fact, all of us we belong to this institute so passionately, so much, and I'm sure there are lots of information that will disappear when we die or when we leave, let us say. So therefore, I think it's a good suggestion that you made, and I really liked your suggestion. So as I said, so we can go on, but I would like to really thank all four of you for such a wonderful engagement that we had with you. But we don't leave you before we kind of want to give something to carry from TIFR. Okay. Can I request, Jayram? So these are nice mementos that we created for
the asset forum in which you
Thank you so
people have given this panel discussion. It completed 40 years. Indrani. And our panel moderator. And we also have something more for from Oindrila's office. Yeah, Indrani. So this is, I think, for three of them. One.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
This is for Vrunda. This for Vice. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much actually being patient. I know it is 45 minutes beyond the stipulated time, but I think it was so wonderful you all cooperated. So now please join for a cup of tea at the West Canteen and we can interact further with all of them. Yeah. So.